I'm about to show you the 7 most evil human experiments ever documented. By the end of this video, you'll wish you'd never learned number 1, because number 1 killed 300,000 people. 7 real experiments, 7 real doctors, 7 real governments. Every story in this countdown is documented, verified, confessed under oath, or discovered decades later in files they tried to burn. We're counting down from number 7 to number 1, and each one is worse than the last. On this list, a university that psychologically tortured orphaned children and hid it for 62 years. A CIA program that erased the minds of thousands of Americans while their families watched. A doctor who whistled Mozart while performing surgery on twins without anesthesia. And at number 1, a facility so evil, the United States government made a secret deal to protect the men who ran it. You've heard of the Nazis, but you've probably never heard of what happened at Unit 731. Let's start with number 7. Before we begin, you need to understand one thing. Every experiment on this list has something in common. The people who ran them didn't think they were evil. They thought they were doctors, scientists, patriots, public servants. Some of them won awards. Some wrote textbooks. Some raised families and went to church on Sundays. And then they went to work and did things that would haunt humanity forever. That's the terrifying part. Evil doesn't wear a costume. It wears a lab coat. It carries a clipboard. It has a PhD. Because the moment a human being becomes a subject, the moment a person becomes a number, everything humanity built to protect us collapses. We're counting down from 7 to 1, and I promise you, number 1 will change how you see science forever. We begin in 1939, Iowa, United States. A children's orphanage, the University of Iowa. A speech pathologist named Wendell Johnson has a theory. He believes stuttering isn't physical. It's caused by anxiety. And he thinks he can prove it by giving normal children a stutter. Let that sentence sink in. He wants to give innocent, healthy children a lifelong speech disorder for science. He selects 22 orphans, half normal speakers, half stutterers, ages 5 to 15. They have no parents, no one to protect them, no one to say no. Then Johnson and his assistant, Mary Tudor, begin. For 6 months, they psychologically torture the children. They tell them their speech is broken, worthless, stupid. They tell them to hide from other people. They punish them for speaking. The results? Devastating. Children who had never stuttered developed permanent speech impediments, anxiety disorders, depression. One girl stopped speaking altogether. Another became so terrified of her own voice, she withdrew from all human contact for the rest of her life. The study was hidden, buried, kept out of textbooks. It wasn't uncovered until 2001, 62 years later. By then, most of the victims were dead. The University of Iowa apologized in 2007. The children never got justice. They called it the Monster Study. And it's only number 7. Number 6. The Milgram Experiment, 1961. Yale University, 1961. A young psychology professor named Stanley Milgram is haunted by a question. The Nuremberg trials had just ended. Nazi doctors and soldiers stood before judges and said, over and over, "I was just following orders." Milgram wants to know, was that true, or was it a lie? Would ordinary people, normal, decent human beings, actually torture another person if a man in a lab coat told them to. He sets up an experiment. He recruits volunteers, regular people, teachers, salesmen, housewives. He tells them they're helping with a memory study. Their job is simple: ask questions. If the person in the other room gets it wrong, deliver an electric shock. Each wrong answer increase the voltage. 15 volts, 30, 75, 120, 240, 375, 450. The volunteers can't see the person they're shocking. They can only hear them. At first, they hear grunts, then screams, then please. Please stop. I have a heart condition. Let me out. Then, nothing. Total silence. Now, here's where it gets terrifying. Milgram thought maybe 1 or 2% would deliver the maximum shock. The sadists, the broken ones. He was wrong. 65% of participants delivered the final, potentially lethal shock. 2/3 of ordinary people, because a stranger in a lab coat told them to keep going. They cried, they shook, they begged to stop, but they kept pressing the button. The victim was an actor. There were no real shocks, but the volunteers didn't know that. Milgram's conclusion changed psychology forever. The extreme willingness of adults to go to almost any lengths on the command of an authority constitutes the chief finding of the study.
Translation: 65% of us would be Nazis, if we had the right boss. That was number 6. Number 5. The Stanford Prison Experiment, 1971. 10 years later, California, Stanford University. Psychology professor Philip Zimbardo wants to know something Milgram didn't answer. Milgram showed people would obey evil. But what if they didn't have to obey? What if you just gave them power? What would happen? Zimbardo turns the basement of Stanford's psychology building into a fake prison. He recruits 24 male college students, all healthy, all normal, all psychologically screened. He flips a coin to decide who's a guard and who's a prisoner. The guards get uniforms, sunglasses, batons, whistles. The prisoners get numbers, no names, chains on their ankles. The plan? Watch what happens for 2 weeks. Day 1, nothing unusual. Day 2, the guards start giving punishments, push-ups, solitary confinement, naming prisoners only by numbers. Day 3, a prisoner has a mental breakdown, screaming, crying. Zimbardo lets him out. Day 4, guards begin sexual humiliation, stripping prisoners naked, forcing them to simulate acts on each other, denying them food, denying them sleep, denying them the bathroom, forcing them to urinate in buckets. Day 5, prisoners are broken. They call themselves by their numbers even to their own mothers on family visitation day. Day 6, Zimbardo's girlfriend, a fellow psychologist, visits. She takes one look and says, "You have to stop this, now." The experiment was supposed to last 14 days. It was shut down after 6. Normal, decent college students had become torturers in under a week. Zimbardo later wrote, "It's not that there are bad apples. It's that the barrel makes the apples bad." The line between a good person and a monster isn't who you are. It's the situation you're placed in. That was number 5. We haven't even started the real horror yet. Number 4, MK Ultra, 1953 to 1973. Now we leave the classroom and enter the shadows. The Cold War is boiling. The CIA is terrified. They believe the Soviets and Chinese have developed mind control, brainwashing methods that can turn any human into a puppet. The CIA wants their own. The program is called MK Ultra, approved by CIA Director Allen Dulles, and it's the most disturbing chapter in the history of American intelligence. Over 20 years, MK Ultra experiments on thousands of American citizens, most of them without their knowledge.
without their consent, without any legal protection. Their weapons? LSD, heroin, barbiturates, electroshock, hypnosis, sensory deprivation, sleep deprivation for weeks, torture, psychological breaking of personalities. Their goal? Erase a human being's mind, then reprogram them. Here are just a few cases. CIA agents dosed unsuspecting men in New York bars with LSD, then watched from behind two-way mirrors. Some victims threw themselves out of windows. Others were institutionalized for the rest of their lives. At McGill University in Canada, Dr. Ewan Cameron ran depatterning experiments. He'd put patients into drug-induced comas for weeks, then blast their brains with electric shocks 30 to 40 times a day. Then play recorded messages on loop for months, 16 hours a day, trying to reprogram them. Patients came out unable to remember their own names, unable to walk, unable to speak, their entire lives erased. One CIA scientist, Frank Olson, was secretly dosed with LSD in 1953. 9 days later, he jumped from a New York hotel window, or was pushed. His family fought for the truth for 50 years. When they exhumed his body in 1994, forensic evidence showed he had been struck on the head before falling. MK-Ultra ended officially in 1973, but not because Congress found out, because CIA Director Richard Helms ordered all the files destroyed. Every document, every consent form, every death record. Only 20,000 pages survived because they were misfiled. Everything else is gone. We will never know how many Americans were experimented on, how many died, how many are still alive today, missing pieces of their own minds and don't know why. The U.S. government has never been fully held accountable. That was number 4. Number 3, the Tuskegee Syphilis Study, 1932 to 1972. 1932, Alabama, United States. The U.S. Public Health Service launches a study to observe the natural progression of syphilis, a disease that, at the time, has no cure. It slowly destroys the body, the brain, and eventually kills. They recruit 600 black men from Macon County, Alabama, sharecroppers, poor, uneducated. Most of them can't read the consent forms. 399 of them have syphilis. The rest are healthy, used as a control group. The men are told they're being treated for bad blood. They're offered free medical exams, free meals, a free burial if they die. They think they're being helped. They're not. They're being watched. Doctors deliberately do not treat them. They record symptoms, take blood samples, document how syphilis destroys the human body. Slowly. Then, in 1947, 15 years into the study, the world discovers penicillin. It cures syphilis in days. The doctors running Tuskegee know this. They deliberately withhold treatment from all 399 infected men. They watch them go blind. They watch them lose their minds. They watch them die. They watch their wives become infected. They watch their children be born with congenital syphilis. For 40 years. The study only ended in 1972, not because the government stopped it, but because a whistleblower named Peter Buxton leaked it to the press. When the Associated Press published the story, the country erupted. By then, 128 men had died directly from syphilis or complications. 40 wives had been infected. 19 children had been born with congenital syphilis. President Bill Clinton officially apologized in 1997, 65 years after the study began. Only 5 of the original men were still alive to hear it.
That was number 3. Number 2. Nazi medical experiments, 1939 to 1945. World War II, Nazi Germany. Concentration camps become the largest human experimentation labs in history. Doctors, real, licensed medical doctors, commit atrocities so extreme that after the war, the world would have to create an entirely new legal concept: crimes against humanity. One man rises above all others. His name is Joseph Mengele. His nickname, the Angel of Death. At Auschwitz, Mengele stood on the train platform as new prisoners arrived. With a smile, and sometimes whistling classical music, he would point right or left. Right meant work. Left meant the gas chambers. But some he saved for himself. His obsession was twins. Mengele believed twins held the genetic key to creating a master race. He collected them. Over 1,500 pairs of twins passed through his laboratory. Fewer than 200 survived. His experiments included injecting dyes into their eyes to change the color, permanently blinding many, sewing twins together to create artificial, conjoined children. All died within days. Performing surgery without anesthesia, because he wanted to observe pain responses. Deliberately infecting one twin with disease, then killing the healthy twin, then dissecting them side by side, amputating limbs, removing organs, injecting chemicals into hearts to see how long a body could survive. He killed children. He killed babies. He killed pregnant women, then dissected them and their unborn children while family members watched. Other Nazi doctors were just as monstrous. Sigmund Rascher ran freezing experiments. Prisoners were dunked in ice water, some for hours, to see how long a human body could survive extreme cold. Most died. Herta Oberhäuser deliberately infected wounds with wood, glass, and bacteria to simulate battlefield injuries, then observed as prisoners died of gangrene. At the Nuremberg trials after the war, 23 Nazi doctors stood before the world. 7 were hanged, but most escaped. Mengele fled to South America. He was never captured. He lived comfortably in Brazil until 1979, when he drowned during a swim. He died a free man. He died old. He died having outlived thousands of children whose only crime was being born a twin. That was number 2, and you might be thinking, how could anything be worse than that? Wait until you hear about number 1. Number 1. Unit 731, 1935 to 1945. Harbin, occupied Manchuria, northern China. While the world watched the horrors of the Holocaust unfold in Europe, a parallel horror was unfolding in Asia, larger, more systematic, more diverse in its cruelty. And most of the world doesn't know it happened. Its name was Unit 731, led by a Japanese army general named Shiro Ishii. Unit 731 was the Biological and Chemical Warfare Research Division of the Imperial Japanese Army. From 1935 to 1945, it operated a massive complex the size of 6 football fields, where over 3,000 human beings were experimented on to death. Every single year. They called their victims Maruta. It means logs, because the cover story for the facility was that it was a lumber mill. They were Chinese, Korean, Russian, Mongolian, some American POWs, men, women, children, pregnant mothers, infants. The experiments included vivisection, surgical dissection of victims while they were still alive, awake, without anesthesia. Doctors would open a person's chest and remove organs one by one while the victim was still breathing, to observe how the body reacted.
Frostbite experiments, where prisoners were taken outside in sub-zero temperatures until their limbs turned black. Then, the limbs were amputated, often while the person was conscious. Pressure chambers, where victims were placed inside sealed rooms and the pressure was slowly changed until their eyeballs popped out of their sockets. Weapons testing. Victims were tied to poles and had grenades detonated near them, flamethrowers used on them, and biological agents sprayed on them so doctors could observe wound patterns. Deliberate infection. Prisoners were injected with plague, anthrax, cholera, and typhoid, then dissected alive at different stages of the disease. Rape experiments. Women were deliberately impregnated, then had experiments performed on their fetuses. Some had their unborn babies removed alive. And here is the most disturbing part of all. The Japanese government also weaponized these findings. They dropped plague-infected fleas on Chinese villages. They contaminated water supplies with cholera. They fed anthrax-laced food to civilians. Estimates suggest that the biological warfare programs of Unit 731 killed at least 300,000 people, most of them Chinese civilians. At the end of World War II, the Japanese military destroyed Unit 731. They killed all remaining prisoners. They burned the buildings. They tried to erase every trace. But then something happened that most people don't know. The United States government made a secret deal with Shiro Ishii and his top scientists. In exchange for their research data collected through the torture and murder of thousands of human beings, the U.S. granted them immunity, full immunity. No trials, no punishment, no accountability. Ishii lived out the rest of his life peacefully in Japan. He died in 1959, surrounded by his family, at age 67. The Nuremberg trials prosecuted Nazi doctors. The Tokyo trials protected the doctors of Unit 731, because the United States wanted the research. And that data, the data soaked in blood, became foundational to modern American biological warfare research. That is number one. And now you know why almost no one has ever heard of it. Every story in this video is documented, every source is verified, and every victim was a real human being. Someone's child, someone's mother, someone's brother. They didn't consent. They didn't survive. And in most cases, the people who did this to them were never punished. That's the darkest lesson of all. Because these experiments weren't stopped by ethics. They weren't stopped by law. They weren't stopped by conscience. They were stopped by whistleblowers, by journalists, by ordinary people who refused to look away. That's why history exists, not to entertain us, to warn us. Because the moment we forget is the moment it starts again. If this video made you uncomfortable, good. It should. Share it with someone who needs to know. Because the only defense against evil is memory. This channel is called Forgotten Archive for a reason. Because history isn't just what happened, it's what we buried, and what we're finally starting to remember. If this story stayed with you, hit subscribe. Every subscriber is one more person who refuses to let real history stay buried. In the comments, I want to know, had you ever heard of Unit 731 before today? Which of these 7 shocked you the most? And what other forgotten atrocities do you want me to uncover next? Tell me where you're watching from. Let's see how far this story travels tonight. Next time on Forgotten Archive, we open another chapter the world tried to close. See you there.